Hello everyone. Today's session will discuss the liberal perspective on the state, which is the unit 4th of the MA Public Administration program, that is course 011. So in this session, we'll focus on the how the state is being viewed by the liberalist, like the other school of thought, like Marxist and so on. So we'll come to know the meaning, the nature, the scope, purpose, and end of this state so far as the liberal view is concerned. So let me focus on the first, what you understand by the perspective. So perspective is a point of view, how you can understood and see things. So an individual can perceive, and an individual can experience, belief, and viewpoint how he could see or understood things. Like a glass of water, a glass is having half water. Whether you can see that glass is having a half water or it is half empty, which both are correct, which you would see that whether this glass is half of water or the glass is half empty. So this is an perspective. An individual can see the things. So let me focus on how the liberalist can see the state. So in this point of liberalist, what could be the function of the state, what could be the role of the state, what could be the end of the state. So the concept of state has figured as the central theme in political philosophy, the political thought, and basically state is a political associations that establishes sovereign jurisdictions within defined territorial border and exercise authority through a set of permanent institutions. In other way, we can view that state is like other institutions. It is a political institutions. And government is regarded as an essential element of the state. In real practice, it is the government who represent the state. Government exercises all authority and functions on behalf of the state, and the main objective of the state is the well-being of its citizens. This has been the central focus of attentions of many political thinkers since its beginning from the Greek city-state. So the state can be viewed in different perspectives or different, and there are three different kind of perspective or different views that state can be viewed. Number one, from an idealistic perspective. From an idealistic perspective, the second one is the functional perspective, and the third one is the organizational perspectives. So far as idealistic perspective is concerned, we can recall the Hegel's identified three movements, namely the family, the civil society, and the state. And the family, the private member association, or you can private member community, then the civil society and the state. Hegel conceived of the state as an ethical community underpinned by mutual sympathy. That is the universal altruism, where the state is having. And functionalists focus on the role or purpose of the state institutions. How the state institutions is been functioning. The central function of the state is invariably seen as a maintenance of the social order, which the Marxist having main argument on these issues. The last one is the organizational view of the state. In organizational view, state as the apparatus of government in its broader sense, a set of institutions that are recognizably public and responsible of the collective organizations. That means state is in public institutions. it is a responsibility is to take care of the public and the collective interest, the public interest. So these are the three different view of the state. State can be viewed as a functional point of view, what could be the role of the state, the organizational point of view, what could be the role of the state, and the other one is the idealistic approach. So these are the three view of the state. We can see how the state is, whether it is idealistic state or functional state or it is organizational states. But let me focus on the state from the liberal perspective, how the liberal school of thought or how the liberal theorists see the states in terms of the liberal liberalist point of view. What could be the role, what could be the function, and what could be the nature of the states, what is the end of the states. So the liberals is the offsprings of the liberalism. So before we can understand the liberals' perspective of the state, it would be better to understand the basic element of the liberalism, what the liberalism is talking about. And in liberal schools, what is the basic element of the liberalism? So in this light, it is possible to identify some key element of the state. Before going into this liberal perspective, let me focus on this very briefly, the key element of the state, so that the state can be understood in terms of liberal perspectives. So in the light of it, you can identify some key element of this state, that is the state is a sovereign state. State institutions are recognizably public, and the state is an exercise in legitimation and instrument of domination, is a territorial association. Therefore, we can conclude it, state is a sovereign, state is recognizable public institutions, state is having the legitimacies from its governed, state is a dominant institutions, and it is having a territorial bodies, territorial association. So the notion of individualism in the liberalism, so far as liberalism is concerned, the notion of the individual giving more emphasis, and in liberalism, the notion of individualism having more and more emphasis. So liberalism is an ideology based on the commitment to individualism, freedom, toleration, and consent. So in individualism, what is focused on is that the state is giving more and more emphasis to individual liberty, individual freedom, and state is having a role of minimal state. That means state is a negative state, where state is not interfering in the activities of this individual until and unless there is issues of law and order. So that other way, state is reducing to just to maintain a state law and order. So it is a minimal state, and the freedom of the individual is giving much more importance. So there is a dichotomy that if the state interfere, there is a possibility of infringement of this individual freedom, so far as this prime thesis of this liberalism is concerned. Therefore, to make the individual or to enjoy the individual as maximum as freedom, state is reducing its role and playing just a watchman role. Until unless there is a problem of law and order, state is not interfering any activities of these individuals. So the liberal theory of the state, its functions, role, and the nature of state power would invariably focus on ensuring, protecting, and enlarging the individual freedom. As I mentioned, that individual freedom is topmost priority, where state is keeping away its hand so far as its interference is concerned, and limiting the role and function of the state. So state is reduced as a minimal state, and its function is just to maintain law and order, like this, no, policemen. If there is a problem of law and order, then only state is interfering. And in terms of economic, state is no way interfering the activities of the individual. Allowing state interference only when it helps an individual gain or more liberty and freedom. There only the state is allowed to interfere, making individual the source of state and governmental power. Hence, state is providing, or the state facilitating to enjoy individual freedom as maximum as possible, and state is reducing its role as a minimal state. It views the liberty of individual and the authority of the state as antithetical. As I said, if the state interfere in the individual liberty, there is a possibility. The liberalist believe that there is a possibility that the individual freedom could be infringed. Therefore, state is keeping its hand away and not interfering this individual activities until and unless there is a law and order issue, or the state is providing more, or the state is providing facilitating more in terms of gaining the freedom, and declare that the freedom of the individual would be secure by limiting the state actions. If the state action is well limited, if there is limited state actions, the individual would enjoy the more freedom. So this is the mechanistic view of the states. Liberalist viewpoint of view, it is the mechanistic view of the state. State is otherwise known as mechanist state. Liberal reject the earlier Greek theory of state as an organic community or an ethical institution, but an artificial institution. Earlier, so far as Greek state is concerned, it was a natural state. Like the Aristotle, Plato believe that state is a natural institution. It is not man-made institutions, and the state grow like this. The human being grow, or like any living being grow. Therefore, the state is superior than the individual. This point has been rejected by the natural school, that is mainly the starting from the contractualist schools like Hoplock, Rousseau, that the state is not an natural institutions, rather it is an artificial institutions. And this concept or this thinking has been developed in Europe in later 16th and early 17th century as the byproduct of this twin revolution, that is the industrial revolution and the Renaissance in the Europe, which is contributing a lot so far as the modern state is concerned, and the writing of Hobbes, Locke, Rousseau, and so on. So the journey from the journey of the liberalism from the Europe to the America and the other world, starting from this Europe only, and this twin revolution, as I said, the industrial revolution and the Renaissance contribute a lot of this, the artificial development of the thought of the artificial institutions. State is an artificial institutions. So state created as a result of human will. State has been created just because of the human will. That means the man created the state for his own good and for his own service. So state is for specific purpose, like the other association in the society, and created by man. Hence, it cannot be superior to the creator. That means a state is created by the individual through the contract, as I mentioned, and whatever the contract signed between the state and this individual, the state has to follow. Therefore, state is not superior to its creator, the individual who is created by the state, and its function regulate interest of the individual. It is the last but not least, it is dynamic by nature. As I said, state is created by the individual as per their requirement. So the requirement is not static. Society is not static. Nature of the society is not static. Therefore, When the nature of the society has been changing in course of time, the changing of the nature of the state also to fulfill the requirement of these individuals. So state is having the dynamic by nature. So the basis of the state is also the consent. As I said, state is individuals by nature, state is minimal by its nature, state is reducing like just to maintain law and order. So the basis, another element of the state is having the consent. Liberals reject the earlier theory which is believed that state is the result of superior physical force and that force is the basis of the state. This has been rejected by the liberal, and because of this the theory of state is an artificial institution which is being created by the individual for its own purpose. So it replaces the notion of force by the notion of the consent. So there must be a consent. That means legitimacy is must. People given their consent to rule over, and people, so far as the contractualist is concerned, people not surrender all their right. People surrender their limited right. Hence, the government is limited so far as function is concerned, just to facilitate, just to provide security and safety and prosperity of the individual in the society. So in the liberals' view, state is not having the force like the earlier the natural school thought. And when we are talking about the consent, the legitimacy, that means people need to provide their consent so far as government is concerned. Until unless there is a legitimacy and people accept it, the government could not run. The state cannot be continue. Therefore, the rule of law is must. That means there must be prevail of rule, and it is not the wishes of the incumbent or the government. So the liberal perspective believes that social control, security and freedom could be secured through man-made law. So it is the law which regulates the society and the human behavior, not the individual choice, or it is not the king, or it is not the incumbent which rule over, rather it is the rule which is rule over this individual, and the rules and the regulation is being made by these individuals. That is the law-making body in later stage of the liberal state. That is the constitutional government, the parliament which makes the law, so and so, and the representative government. These are these various elements of this liberal state in later part of the development. Hence, rule of law is prevail over anything. And the idea of state is a legal entity was put forwarded, as I said, the supremacy of the law. So the idea of state is a legal entity was put forwarded by Bodin and Hobbes, and later on redefined by Bentham. In course of time, this legal view came to be associated with constitutional perspective of lawmaking by the parliament, as I said, as a source of law, that is right, liberty, equality, etc. And the democracy, all are legal in characters. So these are the product of the democratic institution which is being made by this individual for their own purpose and requirement. So state, as I said, in a liberal view, state is reducing its role to just to maintain a law and order, and its scope is minimal. So state is a necessary evil. In this context, we can say that state is a necessary evil, which is said by Thomas Paine, that liberals saw state in negative term. It is necessary because only it could provide law, order, security of life, prosperity in the society. Other than state, we may go to the free existence of the state, that is the nature of the state, said by Hobbes, Locke and Rousseau. Therefore, no one wants to go to the free existence of state where life is not secure. Therefore, state is required to provide law, order, security of life and prosperity of life. But it was an evil also, because it was an enemy of the human liberty. As I said, when the state is expanding its role, interfering in the other activities of the individual, the liberalist view that it harmed the individual liberty. It restricts the individual liberty. Therefore, the state role has to be minimized and see as the negative state. State can only interfere of the individual liberty if it is harm to the other, or if there is a case of law and order issues, or if the state could provide more liberty to the individual. In that circumstances, only the state can interfere. Rather, state has to be confined to its role just to maintain the law and order in the society. So the theory of laissez-faire, the liberal perspective of state, has its root in laissez-faire capital economy. So the laissez-faire means let the individual be alone. Liberalist view that the economic activities of this individual, state must not interfere. So the theory was derived from the Adam Smith, the theory of laissez-faire derived from the Adam Smith's Wealth of Nations, and supplemented by other like Malthus, Ricardo, Bentham, etc. It held that private property as the scared right of individual. Rise of free market, capital economy, it rises as the ideology of a rising bourgeois. So the laissez-faire theory provides scope for the rise of free market and the capital economy, where only the bourgeois or the capitalist can have the freedom of economic gain, and it serves as the ideology of the rising bourgeois. That means the gaining of the capital by the capitalist will be facilitated in case of the laissez-faire economy and the liberal perspective or liberal state. So the as I said, liberalism started in later 16th and early 17th century in the Europe, because of this twin revolution, impact of twin revolutions, and that is the industrial revolutions and the Renaissance, and many writings of many thinkers, including contractualists and many more. In that stage, it also can be called as the classical liberalism. So the classical liberalism, the role of the state was very minimal, and in then time the requirement of the middle class, the capitalist class, was different. And since the capitalist class, they support the liberal perspective of the state in the Europe in 16th, 17th century, the requirement of the capitalist class have been changed due to the changing of this time and changing of this many more things in the society. And in middle of the 18th centuries, the requirement of this capitalist was different than the later 16th and 17th century. Therefore, the changings of the perspective of liberal state also being changed. Therefore, from minimal state to the liberal converted to the welfare state. So the laissez-faire to the management of the economy or miseconomy. So what happened in the minimal state? State is having a minimal role, that is, in the negative state. State must not interfere in the activities of the individual. But when in early 19 or the late 18th centuries, the requirement of the society could change. As I said, the liberalism having the nature of dynamism, so also the nature of dynamism has been changed from the minimal state to the welfare state in later part of the 19th centuries, and the laissez-faire to the managed economy or mixed economy. That means the laissez-faire theory or the laissez-faire capitalist economy has been heavily criticized in late 18th and early 19th centuries, and it was being criticized by the Marxists, and within the liberalists also being criticized, because the state interference or the state intervention is highly required for the equity in the society, balance in the society, for the economic justice of the society, social justice of the society, those who are waiting for the state services. Therefore, minimalizing the state will serve the requirement of the time to the citizens, those who are waiting for the state services, as I said, mainly for the equity and social justice. Therefore, welfare perspective or welfare element are highly required so far as the state is concerned. Therefore, the laissez-faire theory, the laissez-faire capital economy, has been changed to the managed economy or the mixed economy. And a restriction on all freedom is not evil, as the liberalist thought that if the state expands its activities, there would be a interference of this freedom of the individual. It is not such. Like restriction on all freedom is not evil, rather it guarantees their freedom. And state must be democratic and responsible. Responsible for what? Responsible for the requirement of these individuals. And state should possess democratic institutions such as a written constitution, a representative government, and a guarantee of the civil and political right. Therefore, then only state can serve its ultimate purpose, that is the good of the citizen or good for the society. Thank you.